right, good morning. Pleased to call the Task Force on Power-Based Violence to order. My name is Elizabeth Gunn. I'm the chair of the task force. We'll begin with a committee roll call. Please indicate if you're present. Ms. Alicia Allison. Dr. Kavita Batra.
Present.
Ms. Patricia Charlton.
This is Daniel Archer. I am her proxy today. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Academic Student Affairs at NSHE.
Dr. Stephanie Coleman.
Present.
Mr. Jordan Fischetti. Ms. Erin Frock.
Present.
Dr. Tabor Griswold.
Present.
Dr. Elizabeth Gunn, that's me, present. Ms. Christina Hall.
Present.
Mr. Sean Mabandi. Mr. James Martinez. Mr. Martinez. Mr. Jose Melendrez.
Here.
Dr. Allison Netsky.
Present. Good morning.
Dr. Allison Netsky?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, present.
And Ms. Michelle Sposito.
Present.
And Ms. Lindsay Walterbeek. All right, we have a quorum today. Now I'll turn to agenda item 1, public comment. Public comment will be taken during this agenda item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this item until the matter is included on an agenda as an item on which an action may be taken. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Persons making comments will be asked to begin by stating their names for the record and to spell their last names. The task force chair may elect to allow additional public comment on a specific agenda item when that agenda item is being considered. In accordance with Attorney General File Number 00047, as stated in the Attorney General's Open Meeting Law Manual, the task force chair may prohibit public comment if the content of that comment is a topic that is not relevant to or within the authority of the Board of Regents, or if content is willfully disruptive of the meeting by being irrelevant, repetitious, slanderous, offensive, inflammatory, irrational, or amounting to personal attacks or interfering with the rights of other speakers. With that, do we have public comment in Las Vegas? Seeing no public comment in Las Vegas, do we have public comment in Reno?
There's none in Reno.
Thank you. Are there any callers on the line for public comment?
I have one caller. Caller with phone number ending in 6837. Please press *6 to unmute. State and spell your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to address the task force.
Good morning, Chair Gunn and Vice Chair Griswold and committee members. My name is Kent Irvin, E-R-V-I-N, representing the Nevada Faculty Alliance for the record. I've also submitted written comments for the record. Our learning and working environment should be free of harassment or power-based misconduct. If this conduct does occur, it must be promptly and justly addressed. Our constituents have concerns about long delays in the investigation and resolution of equal opportunity and Title IX complaints. It has been common for them to take months or even years. That is unacceptable. UNR's large backlog of cases has been cleared, but we still hear of issues at various campuses. If a serious case goes unresolved, it means a bad actor may continue to act badly. If a less serious case drags out, it is still traumatic for the complainant because no apparent action is being taken, and for the respondent because even a false accusation puts them under a cloud of suspicion and worry. After months of hanging in the wind, getting a vague notice that the case has been closed with no action hardly provides emotional closure to either party. Your task force charges include determining the incidence of power-based violence and making recommendations to the Board of Regents. The student surveys are good, but just one piece of the needed information. Statistical data should also be collected and reported on all equal opportunity and Title IX complaints for each NSHE institution, including the numbers and types of reports, investigations, and sanctions, the times for notification, interviews, investigative reports, and final resolution, all categorized by the type and severity of the complaint. These data would help uncover deficiencies that need to be addressed and point to performance standards that should be put in place. Committee members, please use the new business item today to request an agenda item on this issue. The Board of Regents need to be asked to put a policy in place on the reporting of these data. Thank you, and thank you for your important work.
All right, thank you. That concludes agenda item 1. Agenda item 2 is a chair's report. I'm Elizabeth Gunn, for the record, pleased to provide updates since our previous meeting. Since the last meeting, I met with Vice Chair Dr. Griswold and Dr. Ronnie DeHeer of the UNR Survey Center. We'll hear from them shortly regarding the progress of additional survey data discussed in the previous task force meeting. Additionally, I reviewed the task force input from our last meeting regarding our initial discussion of existing programs and a gap analysis. We'll revisit that conversation, hopefully identify 1 or 2 action steps for our next meeting. I also conferred with Dr. Stephanie Coleman, who's here today, about engaging with our colleagues in athletics across our institution, and that might be a proposal for new business at the end of our meeting. Regarding conversations around statistics and reporting, later this month, that's coming to an end, I will confer with NSHE's Chief Human Resource Officer, Eric Gilliland, who is heading the conversation of the convening of Title IX coordinators. Looking toward our meeting today, if you'll recall, the task force is charged with considering programs across institutions, possible policy recommendations, awareness campaign, advocacy for personnel, and the survey. So sorting through some of that will continue to be the focus of our conversation today. Thank you, and that concludes agenda item 2. We'll turn to agenda item 3, which is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Jose Melendres.
Thank you, Mr. Melendez. Is there a second?
Christina?
I second that. Oh, sorry.
Dr. Batra?
Yes, I second that.
Any discussion?
Yes, this is Dr. Kavita Batra.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Batra, for the second. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion to approve the minutes carries. We'll turn to agenda item 4, additional data needs and next survey timeline in collaboration with the UNR Survey Center. So Dr. DeHeer, who's present in Reno, and I will lead a conversation discussing the additional data reports for 2023. If you'll recall, in our last task force meeting, we discussed some different iterations of additional data from the fall 2023 reports. And Dr. Griswold and I met with Dr. DeHeer and her excellent team to discuss extracting additional data and a timeline for that process and for getting that data to the task force. So I will turn to Dr. DeHeer to lead the beginning of that conversation. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Ronnie Dare from the Grant Sawyer Center for Justice Studies. I'm the director of that center, as well as the director of survey operations for the Nevada Center for Surveys, Evaluation, Statistics here at the university. I have sitting next to me, who's not on camera, Taya Gianetta, who presented the data for the last meeting, in case you guys have questions that I cannot answer. So I just wanted to update on the climate survey. So we did finish the report. The report is out for public dissemination. I'm assuming it's out there. I don't know if it's on I'll let Dr. Gunn speak to that, but I'm not sure if it's out there on a website yet. But we have finished the report, but we were asked to do some additional analyses and separate the reports for 3 different organizations. So that is what we're working on right now: UNLV, UNR, and CSN. And mainly because those organizations had enough data to be able to separate the reports out separately, and had asked for additional analyses. And we were asked to also provide demographic data, sociodemographic data for all of the institutions. And so far we're working on compiling those 3 extra reports. The analyses, frequencies of all the demographics have been run for all the organizations, and we're putting all those reports together right now. The timeline we have right now is end of October to getting all of those finished. And so I wanted to say that we do have the ability to provide the data, raw data, to the different institutions, but there's a disclaimer on them. I cannot provide any identifiable data. They have to be disaggregated and de-identified, and it's not public record. So I have not approached Dr. Gunn, just so you're aware. I've not responded yet back to the organizations, the 2 organizations that had asked for the data, because I think they just wanted the reports, not the actual data. I think I only know one organization, one university or college that has asked for the actual data to do additional analyses, and I'll reach out to that organization separately. But that's all I have, unless you guys have any other further questions or you wanted me to talk about anything else, Dr. Gunn.
Elizabeth Gunn for the record. Thank you so much for the update and the work you and your team are doing. Just to clarify a couple of points that you mentioned, the system-wide report has been available for some time on the NSHE website, so it has been publicly disseminated, and we appreciate the information about the deliverable at the end of October for the additional reports. Do task force members have any questions about the additional reports that her team is preparing?
Dr. Tabor Griswold, for the record. Dr. DeHere and I have tentatively scheduled a meeting for discussion, and I just thought that at this point, I don't have any questions, but she and I have been figuring a time to actually meet together and discuss things.
Thank you. Elizabeth Gunn, any additional comments, questions for Dr. DeHere and her team? All right, we look forward to the additional information reports. And again, thank you for your collaboration and the work that you all do. While you're here, if time allows for your schedule, I know you have a commitment. If we could turn to our timeline, one of the discussions that the task force put forward in our previous meeting was discussing a timeline for the next climate survey. This is somewhat codified in the bill. There's reference to a biennial. I would rely on our legal expertise to ensure I'm communicating this correctly, but my understanding is those biennial reports would be at the institutional level. I could not, in reviewing the bill this morning and last night, find the exact language around institutional, interinstitutional surveys, but nonetheless, if we roughly adhere to the biennial language, the next survey will come pretty quickly. So the survey that was administered was fall 2023. That means the next survey would be fall 2025, which is right around the corner. Those of us who worked on the first iteration of the survey now have an understanding of the labor-intensive process that it is. So if we worked backward from the ideal delivery date, which would be September or early October at the very latest, 2025, we can start to piece together the steps that we would need to take. That would involve several survey drafts, this task force voting to recommend this to the Board of Regents, ensuring that our timeline aligns with the Board of Regents meetings and call for agenda items. And then the Board of Regents would vote to move or not to move forward with a survey. So we need to keep all of that in mind, in addition to the writing, the vetting, and the behind-the-scenes work that our colleagues do in IT at the different institutions. So with that, with much of that falling on Dr. Tahir's office, I wanted to ask the task force their thoughts on this, and I'll pause for conversation feedback about the next iteration of the survey.
Point of clarification, really quickly, Ronnie Dare for the record from UNR. You said the dissemination of the next survey, not the results, would be in fall of 2025, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the results you would need by fall or July of 26, is what I'm understanding.
Correct. So Elizabeth.
You said 2025.
Sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
you said 2025, so I just want to make sure.
That may have been, yeah, my mistake. My apologies. So yes,
That's okay.
if the survey is distributed to students fall 2025, then we would look at results in the spring of 2026. And that would probably go into the summer, just like it did this previous cycle. Because of the.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Don't worry.
Chair, Dr. Gunn, I have a question. Stephanie Coleman for the record. The Board of Regents would approve the dissemination of the survey, or so technically if they wanted, they could say no?
Yes, Elizabeth Gunn, this, we're recommending body to the Board of Regents, and so we would vote to recommend that they vote to approve a survey, and then we would work on the distribution, the writing and the distribution of that survey. We can start writing and thinking about that ahead of time, but it is the Board of Regents' decision. Any further comment, conversation about the actual survey, next steps? I'll just remind the task force to engage with the actual legislation as you're considering how we move forward with this item, and if we move forward with this item in a future meeting. The language in the bill is extremely descriptive and prescriptive about how the survey should be what should be included and how that process should unfold, such as consult with student government organizations, review best practices, provide opportunity for comment, consult with institutions on optimizing effectiveness of distribution of the survey, and so forth. There's a robust amount of language to guide us in that process. So I invite you all to stay close to that language in the legislation. If there are no further comments or feedback on agenda item 4, we will thank you, Dr. Tahir, and we'll move to agenda item 5.
Thank you.
Agenda item 5 is services and gap analysis. So in our previous task force meeting, we spent a good amount of time generating some great ideas about this. I believe we have some slides to accompany this agenda item. We reviewed the presentations, the most recent presentations from our colleagues from across the institutions, and we identified ways to move forward with this information, some possible ideas, beginning of ideas of possible recommendations. So the conversation today, I wanted to review some of the highlights of that, of the analyses that we undertook, and discuss how we might want to think about collaboration, convenings, if allowable, committees to work on, subcommittees of the task force to work on some of these items. So we reviewed on-campus services, for each of the institution and off-campus connections for each of the institutions. And we also learned some really good news that there are interinstitutional convenings as well. So with that in mind, a couple of possible points of discussion. We can continue to move forward and think about recommendations that we would like to bring for a vote at our next task force meeting, and/or we can think about organizing our work by the major categories within, in addition to the major categories within the bill. So those are the survey, policy, MOU with external agencies, and we already have some of that work. We have evidence of that work going on. There's language around awareness campaigns and how we would make recommendations to the board about how to organize those, as well as the possibility to recommend advocacy and a staff position as a victims advocate. I'll pause there. So we've got 4 major areas, and 5 including the survey, where we can turn our attention to. And the survey might be an ongoing task, but in addition, we have this needs analysis, gap analysis that we conducted. I would very much appreciate your feedback on where to go from there. And then additional areas of policy, MOU, and awareness campaign advocacy. So why don't we start with the needs gap analysis. Again, there's slides to accompany, so I summarized our feedback about the institutions and the on-campus services, off-campus services in the attached materials for you to take a look at. And we can consider what we want to do with this information in terms of making a recommendation or not to the board.
So Jose Melendez with a question. So for each of these areas, then the policy MOU awareness campaign, we have to approve each of those areas, and then there would be work done within each of those areas. Is that right?
Yes, Elizabeth Gunn for the record, yes. So any work that we do, we would need to move the topic to an action item in our subsequent meeting, and then we would need to vote as a committee to recommend that the board move this to one of their agendas for an action item. And once it leaves our committee, it is up to them to determine how they manage the information. So we're recommending bodies, so we could move, so our work could focus on moving forward with the survey and/or one of these other areas simultaneously.
And then just for clarification, so like, for example, the awareness campaign, that I'm assuming that would be like how we educate folks about these policies and the task force and all that. Is that correct?
Elizabeth Gunn, for the record. There's language in the legislation. I pulled some of it for the purpose of our discussion. And I'll read just a few sentences to give you an idea of what the legislation said. If an institution provides programming on awareness and prevention of sexual misconduct to students pursuant to subsection, et cetera, the institution may incorporate the program into one or more courses, condition the award of an associate's degree upon that this would be contingent. A student completing some sort of certification would be a requirement before graduation. If an institution provides programming on awareness and prevention on sexual misconduct, it describes what the employees must do. And so we have to stay within the language of the legislation. But within that, I think that we have the purview within that language to to first consider how to go about actioning the language in the legislation and making a recommendation. So these 5 key areas that I pulled out are trying to organize our conversations around the legislation to decide what we're going to do and how we want to move forward. So previously, we've undertaken a huge lift, which was getting the first interinstitutional survey out of the door, out of the gates in Nevada, which was we were one of a few states in the country to do that. So that was important work. And so if we continue with survey creation, development, dissemination, evaluation, my recommendation would be that we consider one of these additional areas to focus on, and that would be the policy MOU awareness campaign advocacy as codified in the legislation. And how we do that is kind of one of the questions here. What do we want to prioritize, and how do we prioritize that? If I recall from a much previous conversation, I believe that we have the leeway to create subcommittees to work on these items, so that could be a way forward. So I will pause here and listen to feedback.
Stephanie Coleman
Yeah,
for the
I think
record. Thank you. Question, knowing that we have the new Title IX regs, would it be beneficial that we work with those Title IX coordinators so we're not duplicating work? Having gone through a few Title IX searches at Nevada State University, there's programming, awareness, advocacy embedded in those positions. I think it would be advantageous to all of us in our time that we partner with them as well. So we're not duplicating, stepping over everybody, and potentially we have the opportunity to put together something really great because we're partnering with the Title IX coordinators.
And thank you, Dr. Coleman.
Madam Chair.
Elizabeth Gunn for the
Madam
record.
Chair, this is your board counsel, Chris Nielsen. I just wanted to speak to that, add a little bit to that. Linda King, as you know, this is one of the assistant attorneys at NSHE, is well versed and knows everything there is to know regarding Title IX. So I just want to echo that last suggestion. While she's not here today, I think that would really help facilitate to have a conversation with her at some point in between meetings regarding Title IX and coordination thereof. There's a lot of moving parts nationally going on that are kind of outside the state of Nevada's control and the system's control. And I think to help make best use of everybody's time to get things right, I think that's an excellent suggestion to partner up with that, with Linda King.
Elizabeth Gunn for the record. Thank you so much for that additional information context. In conversation with Ms. King, as I mentioned in the chair report, I do have a meeting scheduled with Mr. Gilliland, who's the Chief Human Resources Officer for NSHE, about the conversation and where and if our work overlaps to try to sort that out. He and I are meeting within the next week or two, I believe. So this is an important piece of our conversation, absolutely. I believe Mr. Melendez had additional comments, so I turn the floor back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think for my part of it, would definitely that we look at, I like the component of the awareness campaign in the sense of what's already being done. And maybe from that we could pull some kind of like what's working best practices type within the system. And then I don't know if we look at outside, but potentially, but I think that's where I would definitely like to, for my part, be, I guess would be a priority for how that's actually taking place. And if there's anything out there that we can show that is really making a big impact on our campuses.
Stephanie Coleman. No, go ahead.
Sorry. This is Christina Hall for the record. I agree with Jose and everything that's been said. It sounds like we had put some effort together to create the survey, which we launched one round of, and it sounds like we will want to continue to do that moving forward. But it sounds like a lot of the heavy lifting of creating that survey has already been accomplished, which is great. So I think it makes a lot of sense to add an additional recommendation or focus for this committee in addition to that survey. That's kind of what I've been hearing, so correct me if I'm wrong. And it sounds like one of those areas is around awareness and prevention efforts. I just wanted to maybe it's a question. there's a big difference between just an awareness campaign that, you know, these issues exist and that there's services on campus versus a true violence prevention effort, where you're really looking at addressing those risk and protective factors for violence prevention and addressing those. So each are great, but they also require different resources, different efforts to be able to implement them. So I just wanted to see if we could narrow down what exactly we wanted to tackle, so we could really have a good idea of what resources we needed to pull together in order to accomplish that. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Stephanie Coleman again for the record. I actually wholeheartedly support what Ms. Hall stated, that there is a difference between awareness and prevention campaigns and different lenses of perspective, how you accomplish that goal. So very supportive of, you know, our steps toward awareness, and then maybe a subgroup of awareness is prevention. Wanted to ask about advocacy, and is that something we can consider? I know I've attended the past board meeting, special board meeting, and then this meeting, and there seems to be a repetition coming from potentially UNR regarding some of the challenges that they're seeing. And again, is it in our scope to be that advocate voice for them? I know just the students that I've worked with and hearing some of their past experiences, feeling like they're bumping their heads up against the wall. Nobody's listening, nobody's listening, nobody's listening. That's kind of the feeling I'm getting with the one public comment, knowing that I've heard that public comment at least 3 or 4 times now. And again, wondering, is that something we need to step in and focus on advocacy, making sure that voices are being heard in this space? And understanding it's an uncomfortable space. People don't like doing this type of work. But again, I always like to flip it and say, people don't enjoy being the recipients of, such horrible violence or attacks. So again, we have awareness. I'm kind of throwing my hat in the ring for advocacy as well as another space. Thank you.
This is Christina Hall for the record. I loved what the previous comment just said. I think awareness and prevention efforts are really wonderful, but they need to come and be done in conjunction with good advocacy, because we know that as we do more prevention work, oftentimes we get more disclosures of experiences of violence, not because it's creating it, but because it's allowing folks to understand that they can reach out for support. And so if we do prevention work and there's no one to connect those students to for that support, then we're a little bit behind of what we can do for students. So having that solid foundation of making sure we know what the advocacy resources are on each campus or even NSHE wide, I think would be really good to start with in order to then launch into that awareness and prevention piece more heavily. So making sure that we are creating those policies and procedures that really help in establishing avenues for folks to advocate for themselves and for folks to help them advocate for themselves as well. So institutional support for that advocacy. So I totally agree with that comment, and I think that would be a great place to start as well.
Stephanie Coleman again for the record. I apologize. I feel like I'm just on a bandwagon today. Going back to awareness, and as Dr. Gunn referenced, I made a comment at the last meeting regarding our athletic directors. I'm still utterly amazed at the number of students who are not familiar with this world. And I do think it's the best place to start is in athletics with our athletes and ensuring that they all understand the scope of what this looks like, not just student to student, but other spaces that can be very uncomfortable as well. And again, to what Ms. Hall just stated, there has to be that flow. We can get students to come to awareness campaigns and wear shirts and T-shirts and sign up and do this, that, or the other. But if the student doesn't have a place to see the resolution of their concern, that's concerning. I think that has a horrible ripple effect for the work that we're doing. So again, if we compare the trifecta of marketing, awareness, and advocacy together, and again, get some feedback from athletic directors, our Title IX coordinators, anybody who works in the ombudsman type of space, we can really make a difference. And as we draft a new survey, we may be able to ask some different type of questions that will resonate for students who did not know that they could advocate for themselves or didn't know that there's a space for these type of concerns. Thank you.
Dr. Gunn, this is Tabor Griswold for the record. Ziva Edmondson, who is our director of Title IX, would like to address this subject.
Hi, can y'all hear me? Am I on? Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah, Ziva Edmondson for the record. I'm the director of the Center for Civil Rights and Equal Access and the Title IX coordinator for the University of Nevada. And I just wanted to share when we were talking about advocacy, these are great conversations. But I do want to add that if this is something that would fall under an office that deals with Title IX, we have to be fair and equal to everyone, to complainants as well as respondents. And so I just want us to be mindful that for an advocate, they will need to be able to provide advocacy for both complainants and respondents, as just keeping that in mind as we move forward. All our campuses, I think, do have advocates. I know UNR has quite a few different options for advocacy on our campus, but we do need to be mindful that we're providing services for everyone involved in these types of concerns.
Elizabeth Gunn for the record. Thank you so much for being here and for providing that context. It's important. We appreciate the work you do as well.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Gunn again. To draw our attention to the wording in the legislation, we're discussing advocacy as well as awareness. So Section 8 reads, the Board of Regents may require an institution within the system to provide programming on awareness and prevention, and that goes to the recent comments that these are two separate things, but they interact with each other. Of power-based violence to all students and employees of the institution. If the Board of Regents requires an institution to provide programming on awareness and prevention of sexual misconduct, the program must include without limitation, and then there's a long list, including language around consent, drugs and alcohol, and so forth. So we have the guidance there on how to go about this particular portion of the directives in the legislation. Regarding advocacy, you can find that around Section 7. In the legislation, it reads, the Board of Regents may require an institution within the system to designate an advocate. If the board requires this designation, an institution shall designate existing categories of employees who may serve as an advocate. So if we think about we could think about these pieces, we could think of a timeline of how we want to work on these pieces, or we could think about them in more holistically, these things need to happen together. But again, we have some good data from our survey. We've got good data from our institutions about the good work that's already happening, and then we have the language in the legislation. So right now, it sounds like the interests of the task force that are emerging are around the awareness campaign and advocacy. And I agree with Dr. Coleman to ask students to advocate without the underlying support. We don't want to lead them down that path. We want to make sure that our institutions have the support. So that goes back to our gap analysis, needs analysis. If there's anything missing or any kind of recommendation that we might want to consider for within institutions or across institutions before we go down this path.
Christina Hall for the record. One thing when we think about advocacy and having an advocate on campus, I've seen institutions across the nation do it a couple of different ways. One is having advocates within the Title IX office, where we had a previous comment that mentioned that those advocates needed to be able to provide advocacy for all people involved in the process, the complainant process. And so we have some institutions that just have advocates through the Title IX office. We also have institutions that have advocates within the Title IX office, but also outside of the Title IX office. So for example, here at UNLV, we have our Title IX office, and then we have our care center, which has confidential advocacy resources that is separate from the Title IX office. And so I think those, if we want to recommend having each institution having an advocate, I think one of the things that we might want to consider is also seeing if we want to recommend having an advocate within the Title IX office and outside of the Title IX office, if that would be helpful. I know that in working with our Title IX office here at UNLV, it's really helpful to have both of those two roles separate so that it's easier to fully support students holistically, so that the Title IX office, knowing that they need to be objective and that it's an investigative process, they have their role, and then as confidential victim advocates with the care center, we have our role in supporting the person who's experienced the violence. And that can be really hard for an advocate who's within the Title IX office, having to be objective versus someone outside of the Title IX office. Both have their merits and both are very useful, but they would have separate responsibilities, separate kind of mandates, depending on whether they're within the Title IX office or on the outside of the Title IX office, those advocates. And so I think either way can have its merits. Like I said, either way can be beneficial to students. I think if we want to recommend something, we would want to recommend something that would be the most helpful to students and provide the most supports. And I think having, at least in my experience here at UNLV, having both of those options available just opens up those options for victim survivors of violence, which is one of the things that we know is one of the most helpful things for somebody who's experienced this type of power-based violence, is to give them their power back in as many ways as possible, one of which being that they have options to choose from. And so having multiple resources on campus doing similar work can just be really helpful in that way. And so I think looking to other states and across the nation on how they're implementing anti-violence advocacy on their campuses can be really helpful. So maybe that's one place that we can start, and see if there are any other like statewide initiatives similar to this one where we are looking at how we are coordinating advocacy efforts across the state for each institution. I think would be really wonderful to look at.
Stephanie Coleman for the record. I just want to add to what Ms. Hall stated and be mindful that some of the campuses, their Title IX offices are one-person operations. And so that would be the case at Nevada State University. But like Ms. Hall stated, we do have a licensed therapist trained in this area. She's the only confidential individual on our campus. So if we're writing this up, if it's not a definitive campuses you have to do, but recognizing if you have your Title IX individual and a care team or wellness team, identifying individuals in that space who could serve as an advocate. Again, just worrying about resources of some of our smaller campuses that don't have robust programs, like a UNLV or UNR. Thank you. Stephanie Coleman for the record.
Batra for Reddit. Oh,
No, go ahead.
go ahead. So I just want to say one thing. I agree that the data that we have collected through structure survey is going to serve as a baseline for us to target our interventions. But one piece that I feel is missing is like qualitative investigation, meaning doing a quick environmental scan or having some focus groups or interviews with the students, like what are their perceptions about institutional environment, and doing some kind of thematic analysis. I think those will also be important for us to target our efforts in the near future. Thanks.
Stephanie Coleman for the record. Just to add on what Ms. Batra stated, I think there needs to be some probing and some scoping of students regarding their understanding of the word consent. I come across a number of students who aren't really sure when it starts, when it stops. I have the power to say no. And sometimes I think that leads to the hesitation to speak up. So, in terms of doing a deep dive, again, maybe some focus groups with students, gauging what is their understanding of consent. Because sometimes it starts right then and there with their understanding of, did I do something wrong? I started it, didn't stop it. And just empowering, anybody in that space that your consent, can be revoked at any time and you did not do anything wrong. So again, meeting that one into the ground, because in my prior life in Illinois doing this work, consent always seemed to be a stumbling ground for folks understanding, when it starts and when it stops. Thank you.
This is Tabor Griswold. I have a question for you, Dr. Gunn. Would it be appropriate with this conversation going on to look at the presentation that's been referenced a couple of times?
Elizabeth Gunn for the record. If available, it's also linked in the agenda. If you are looking at an electronic version of the agenda, the materials are linked under agenda item 4. There's a link there to reference materials. And thank you. You should now be able to see this on the screen. So we've already discussed the kind of parameters of the survey. So next slide, please. Could we please go to the next slide? Thank you. This is how I was trying to frame our conversation in a couple of simple questions around the services and the gap analysis that we conducted at the last meeting. Next slide, please. And based on our conversations, this is the information I extracted from the presentations that our colleagues delivered a couple meetings ago, as well as our conversations. This is by no means an official final document that encompasses everything that is all the good work being done at our institutions, but I thought this would be good to reference to see what at least that we know about or have been able to capture. And based on that, what additional questions do we have, and or do we see any areas where we want to make recommendations for programming, staffing, coordination. And the unfolding conversation today is we're trying to think about how to link these. So we're linking the directives and the legislation with what's already existing at our institutions, with the additional work that we need to do. It's a couple of complex pieces to hold together at the same time. So we've got the survey, and then we've got these other 4 areas. Some of the work in terms of advocacy and awareness is already taking place. So one avenue, and I think Ms. Hall referenced this, would be for our task force to ask those who engaged in that work to come present to us, make recommendations, and a more in-depth dive into that work. I believe it was Mr. Mabante who noted that there's a collaboration group. There seems, I don't know if these are connected. There's one at least between UNLV and CSN, and then there was another that he mentioned, I believe, at his institution. There's also, and I don't know with whom he's engaging in that interinstitutional collaborative group. There's also partnerships, external partnerships with Nevada Crisis Support Centers. So in terms of advocacy, we could, if we think about how we want to delineate our action steps around this work, we could say one of the first orders of business is to look at a best practice, how to coordinate this across institutions. I think that's kind of our job, but we can get information to do our job better. We could also look at where this is already being done effectively, because we've got some examples here. We could ask those folks to please come talk to us more in depth. Another strategy or an additional strategy at the same time could be to think about, do we want a more holistic interinstitutional engagement with Nevada Crisis Support Centers? The legislation allows for exploration of an MOU with an external partner. They have expertise in that area. That would speak to Ms. Hall's point of having someone external to our institution for victims advocacy. It would also alleviate some of the burden of our institutions with smaller offices that Dr. Coleman referenced. Thinking about organizing our work, again, I continue to welcome feedback on how we might think about our next steps. And the next slide, please, I think is a continuation of, previous slide, is a continuation of the services at our institutions.
Christina Hall for the record. I think, as we've seen in the previous task force meeting and the summary slides, that there is advocacy work happening at the different campuses in different ways based on the resources and the community that each institution is in. And I think that is something we want to lean into. We want to meet the needs of the community and also meet them where they're at. So I think having the summary of each institution and their efforts and advocacy is really helpful. I think one of the things that we might want to do, which Dr. Elizabeth Gunn mentioned, is just kind of come together as advocates across institutions, and maybe that's something that this task force could help facilitate, so that we can share across institutions our practices and our efforts, so that we can help each other improve and increase the services available on campuses. I think if we pool our resources or just pool our knowledge, we could help improve across all institutions how we're serving students, and find ways to brainstorm and serve them better. And that could include outside organizations that are outside of NSHE that some of these institutions are collaborating with. And I think that would be a great place to start, kind of facilitate that gathering of advocates across NSHE, so that we can, and I think this was mentioned at the last task force meeting as a recommendation maybe not a formal recommendation, but a thought to really streamline our efforts for advocacy across the state.
Stephanie Coleman for the record. 100% support what Ms. Hall stated. I think we just need to hear what's everybody doing. You know, how are you making all of this magic work? And then listen and see, okay, where can we improve? Where can we step in and fill in the gaps for some of that?
This is Allison Netsky. For the record, I just wanted to make a couple of comments on this great dialogue that is happening, and it is in regards to data and putting something more into place, being able to look at the resources at the various institutions. I think would be assisted with more information related to the burden, the number of cases, the time it takes to process cases. As we've heard, the different institutions have quite a bit of difference in the staffing that is available. So I think kind of piggybacking on some of the comments made by the Faculty Alliance on understanding what is occurring may be helpful. I will say I don't know what the annual reporting requirements currently are, or looking at the number of cases and things of the like.
Elizabeth Gunn for the record. Thank you all for your comments and feedback and sharing your expertise in this area. It sounds like there is some consensus around asking those who are already doing the advocacy work to come share with us what the work they're doing, the ways they're collaborating. There's maybe some interest in also exploring some parallel work with external agencies and how we might continue to partner with them on a larger scale, as well as finding out the exact workload of those and trying to do the work in our offices, since there's significant variation in the size and scope of our institutions. And I haven't lost track of the awareness and advocacy, the awareness campaigns as well. I still think we need to refine the order in which we want to do these things. Perhaps the next order of business is a better understanding of the landscape of advocacy at our institutions. We have some very high-level information here, and understanding that a little bit better would likely be beneficial to us to make a decision on what kind of recommendation we would provide to the board. I'll rely on our legal expert here, General Counsel. I believe that if I recall from a previous meeting, we have the leeway or the authority to create committees. That could be a possible avenue to address some of this more granular work.
Yeah, Chris Nielsen for the record, Special Counsel of the Board of Regents and your counsel for this committee. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Every public body has the ability within the open meeting law rules to create subcommittees. So that would be one avenue or one tool in your tool shed. Absolutely.
Elizabeth Gunn, thank you for that information and confirmation, so everyone can look for an email from me about subcommittees. If there's no more comment or conversation on agenda item 5, we'll move to agenda item 6, marketing awareness and and outreach. We've already talked about much of this. Part of our role is to make information that we're finding in some of our work public. There's codified ways to do this in the legislation, survey findings. We've done that. Report to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Education. I think that happens every 2 years. That has already happened recently. And there's, again, language from the legislation. The board may require an institution within the system to provide programming on awareness and prevention. Again, I think we've already covered this. If there's any additional comment, conversation, welcome that on agenda item 6.
Christina Hall, for the record, I have a question, I think. So for this third bullet point on your slide for agenda item 6, the Board of Regents may require an institution within the system to provide programming. Would that be something this task force would recommend to the Board of Regents? Because we're not the Board of Regents, so we can't require. So that's something that we would suggest to the Board of Regents. Is that what we're talking about here?
Elizabeth Gunn, for the record, yes, we're recommending a task force. We don't have the authority to mandate an institution to do anything. That comes through this task force as a recommendation. We would need to vote on a recommendation, so that would have to be agendized for our task force in a subsequent meeting, and then we would take a vote to recommend or not recommend something to the board, and then they would consider that.
Thank you. And a follow-up question, kind of going back to one of our previous comments, is each institution has different resources available to them to implement something like this. So I think if we would want to consider recommending this to the board, we would want to consider what those different resources are on each campus. And see if maybe we don't want to do any unfunded mandates where we're leaving institutions struggling to fulfill. So I think that's something that we can look at. Also, if there is a possibility of looking at potential grant opportunities and things like that to help institutions implement something like this in the future, we could potentially look at that. UNLV just received a large federal grant to implement violence prevention through the Office of Violence Against Women. So that's something that UNLV is going to start looking at. Starting in October 1st is when the grant year starts, or the grant period starts. And so I'd be happy to explore this more, but I just wanted to let the committee know that UNLV is going to be implementing violence prevention programming in order to fulfill the requirements of a grant that we received recently. So.
Elizabeth Gunn, for the record. Thank you, Ms. Hall. I appreciate that information from your institution. And I encourage all task force members, this is an incredible opportunity for us to think about how we want to shape this conversation across our institutions. We have support of our colleagues, chancellor, vice chancellors in the NSHE office, who can facilitate some of the conversations with institutions regarding resources and resource allocation. And so while we are bound by the language in the legislation, we can think creatively and innovatively about how we go about this work. Thinking about grants is one of them, so I appreciate that.
So, Chair, this is Jose Melendres. Just thinking about this process, then, would this be something maybe that, from what I'm hearing, all the different conversations, would it be possible, maybe something to think about? And I'm not going to say right away, obviously, but down the road, would this maybe create an opportunity for us to have some kind of like convening town hall forum, community session like that, where not only do you bring the different areas together from the different institutions who can present on their best practices, but then if we engage, depending on how we were to promote that or bring that together, that we could engage community partners and student and other folks who, it would also be a way for us to capture some information that day, and different things that could come forward from that, depending on how we were to present this and promote something like this if folks felt that might be one direction we could go.
Elizabeth Gunn, for the record, again, I would refer to council for this. There is again, I'm keep going back to legislation here. There's language about a public meeting, which this is, but I understand, Mr. Melendez, you're referring to something probably much more student-facing, kind of a symposium or workshop.
Yes.
Yeah, I get this is Chris Nielsen for the record. I guess the devil's always in the details. I'd have to get a little bit more information about what the workshop would look like. But typically, workshops are agendized much like meetings are, in that certain quorum rules apply. Notices go out, etc. But again, there's I think maybe something like this could be. I could discuss this with the chair offline, and we could come up with some options.
Yeah, and again, Jose Melendez, it's just an idea based from different ways that we could deliver what we're trying to do with this, and also another way. I know that in the past I've worked on different things where not only you delivered information or awareness material, but then also was an opportunity to build some community around it, and then as well as to collect information from what people are experiencing from their respective areas, whether it's a student, whether it's a faculty member, just different ways that this could be done. From my experience in the world of health equity work that we've done in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Melendez and Mr. Nielsen. Any final comment, remark regarding agenda item 6? All right, thank you all for the discussion. Agenda item 7 is new business. Items for consideration at future meetings may be suggested. Any discussion of an item under new business is limited to description and clarification of the subject matter of the item, which may include the reason for the request, and no substantive discussion may occur at this meeting on new business in accordance with the Nevada Open Meeting Law. Based on our conversation and some conversations between meetings, I'd like to defer to Dr. Coleman regarding a possible future agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Gunn. Moving forward with the idea of hearing from the NSHE athletic directors regarding how they approach awareness of their athletes regarding power-based violence, their understanding of Title IX. I would like to invite those athletic directors to share how they are communicating these efforts to their students.
Elizabeth Gunn, for the record, thank you so much for that. Another potential future business would be the ensuring we understand the delineation between our work and Title IX efforts. An additional consideration is for new business is what we just discussed, which would be inviting advocates from the state, both within and beyond our institutions, to help us better situate the work that's being done and what recommendations we may want to put forward based on that work. And then I defer to other task force members for possible new business.
Chair Jose Melendez, so is this where we would want to maybe bring back the letter that was submitted by the Faculty Alliance for that to become an agenda item for the future, to give it more conversation?
Elizabeth Gunn, for the record, that might be encompassed in the delineation between our work and Title IX effort and who's responsible for reporting and how that reporting happens. Again, that's Ms. King's area of expertise. I will be meeting with Mr. Gilliland soon, and maybe if Mr. Nielsen has any additional feedback about that request for new business.
Yeah, Chair, thank you again. This is Chris Nielsen. I just sent you an email just so we can talk offline at your convenience to discuss some of this stuff in conjunction with Ms. King. So thank you.
All right, Elizabeth Gunn for the record. Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. Thank you for the question, Mr. Melendez, and the comment, the public comment from NFA is relevant to the work we do, but I think it requires additional consultation with our council to find where the boundaries are between what we're doing and what Title IX offices are responsible for. So thank you. Any other ideas for new business? All right, that concludes agenda item 7. Agenda item 8 is public comment. Any public comment in Las Vegas? Seeing no public comment here. Is there public comment in Reno?
There's none in Reno.
Any public comments through callers on the line?
There are no callers on the line this time.
All right. To conclude the meeting, I'd like to thank you all for being here. Thank you for the important, meaningful conversation today. A special thanks to our colleagues in the system offices for ensuring that our meetings are here and run so smoothly. Appreciate that. And the task force is adjourned at 10:14. Thank you.